The ASC, that grand and steadfast sentinel of the real estate appraisal profession, has spent decades ensuring order in a world that might otherwise resemble a carnival guessing game. And at its helm for these many years has been a man who knows every cog and lever of this mighty machine. We have the rare pleasure of sitting down with him, an opportunity as rich as a freshly inked deed and twice as enlightening. So, if you have even the faintest curiosity about how the backbone of property valuation stays upright, you do well to pull up a chair. Join us after the break.
Are you ready to take your career in real estate appraisal to the next level? Join the Appraisal Institute, your go-to source for expert insights, industry trends, and the latest updates from the world of valuation. Whether you're an experienced appraiser or just starting out, they bring you industry resources, classes, and all the knowledge you need to stay ahead. Join today and be part of a community that's shaping the future of the appraisal profession. Visit appraisalinstitute.org to learn more and become a member. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast with your host, Hal Humphreys.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Jim Morrison, and again, as always, we have our host, Hal Humphreys. Let me bring him in. Hey, Hal.
Hi, Jim. How you doing today?
We're doing great, and we're so excited to have Jim Park, the former executive director of the ASC, join us. It's a huge guest for us. We've had him on the Buzzcast in the past, but not in a while. He's always one of our most requested speakers for Val Expo, and we're excited to have him back. Hey, Jim, welcome.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Hal. How are you guys? If it's not too late to say Happy New Year, Happy New Year. It's already been an eventful one, but thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and look forward to chatting.
Thank you for being here. It has been an eventful year so far. Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us today. I can't imagine there's a single appraiser out there that doesn't know who you are, but for those that don't know how you got into this mess of real estate appraisal, tell us a little bit about your history.
Sure. So my history, like a lot of appraisers, goes back to my father, and he retired from the Air Force after 32 years as a pilot. He was a highly decorated fixed wing and helicopter pilot and a combat veteran from World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Won the Silver Star, or excuse me, didn't win it, but was awarded the Silver Star for a rescue in the Korean War. He had over 8,000 hours of flight time. And I tell you this because not only because I'm proud of him, but it goes directly to answering the question of how and why I got into the industry. So my dad was certainly a man of the highest integrity and could have done many things, certainly things that would have been more lucrative than getting into the appraisal profession. But he chose appraising because of some of the flexibilities of having your own business allowed, but he also loved the idea that appraisal is about providing an unbiased, independent, objective opinion of value of their most important asset. You know, he really valued the idea that people relied on appraisers to give them that independent assessment of their home or their commercial property. He dabbled in sales at the beginning of his career, but found appraising to be much more of his liking. So, that was back in the early mid 70s. I started going on inspections with him as a kid, and finally joined my brother and dad in Park and Associates in Colorado Springs while I was still in college. As soon as I graduated from college, I was already fairly steeped in the business, and my dad started pushing me to get my SRA and MAI designations. I did get my SRA 2 or 3 years later. I was, I don't know, 24, 25 years old at the time. And away I went. My career started in the late 80s during the S&L crisis. So the vast majority of my assignments at the beginning were foreclosures. And the Colorado Springs was right at the epicenter of the foreclosure crisis. After I got my designation, I decided I wanted to spread my wings and maybe not get stuck in the family business. I ended up moving to Richmond, Virginia to work for, I believe, the very first national AMC, TRW. From there, I went to Chevy Chase Bank up in the DC area and eventually made my way to the Appraisal Foundation in 2000, where I was a staff member. I was the first appraiser to work at the foundation. Also was on their board of trustees and chaired their industry advisory council. And then in 2009, somehow found my way to the Appraisal Subcommittee, and was fortunate enough to spend the last almost 16 years with the subcommittee before retiring at the end of last year.
That is one of the most impressive resumes I've heard in a long time. And I think the important thing that I get out of it is it's awful easy for appraisers to have opinions about people at the ASC and at the foundation and stuff like that. I think it's important to remember that you're an appraiser at heart. You came into this business, your father was an appraiser, you're an appraiser at heart. This is what you do. You're not just some lackey brought on to run a subcommittee. You're an appraiser. And I think that's a really good thing. And, Jim, my dad got me into the business as well. And I just lost my father the Saturday before Thanksgiving last year. And I've had a lot of time to think about, the influences that he had on me and the fact that he got me into this business as well. I was holding the dumb end of the tape for my dad when I was 12 years old. It was a different time back then. Before we hopped on, you had an example of a report that your dad had done back in the 70s.
Yeah. So this was somehow I've held on to this all these years. My father and mother have passed some time ago, but this was the first report he did to demonstrate to the gentleman that he was going to work for that he knew how to do an appraisal. So this was from 1973. You can see, basically the salient facts there, the address. There's a property. This is the home that I grew up in Colorado Springs. And it appraised for, I don't think I'm revealing any classified information here or
assignment results being delivered to the public.
Confidential information. It was appraised for the whopping sum of $34,400.
Oh my gosh.
Here's one of the maps that he did. Sales comparison approach. See, the sales comparison approach has been around for a long time.
And that's
even well before the Green Hornet.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's so old that it's not even green, and it's not the tear off, glue bounds on a cardstock thing.
Well, it's narrative. It's a narrative report.
I love it. The weird thing is we choose to hold on to things that wouldn't mean a thing to anybody else on earth, but they mean something to us. I have my father's real estate appraisal license, the very first one when they've started licensure, on the wall in our cabin. I don't know why. It's not a particularly precious document, but it means something to me.
Those kind of historical documents are invaluable.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, hey, Jim, I think it's really important that appraisers understand that you are an appraiser. I know we can say that from a stage. People sometimes don't believe us, but this actually illustrates a point. Let's move on to the Appraisal Subcommittee. Tell us about your role at the ASC.
Well, to start, the the opportunity to have that position, hold that position for the time period that I did was really an honor and a privilege, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. While I was still working at the foundation, I became very familiar with the subcommittee, for obvious reasons, working with them pretty closely. And when I learned that the executive director at the time was preparing to retire, it was a position that I really started keeping my eye on. And one of the reasons I really wanted to take on that challenge is because of my appraisal background. The subcommittee didn't have, for the most part, appraisers working there at all. They'd never had um, a an appraiser as their executive director. They'd only had two prior executive directors before me, but neither one was an appraiser. And I thought that that was really important to have that kind of experience and background um, to lead the agency that oversees licensing of appraisers. I was the first appraiser at the Appraisal Foundation, and I could see that in working with the boards and working with the public and working with other appraisers, there was a benefit. Not about It's not about me specifically, but just having an appraiser in that seat that can talk to other appraisers is is helpful.
I would say it's critical. The ability to speak the same language, sing from the same hymnal is critical in communicating effectively back and forth.
Yeah,
Over the years, over the years, the ASC. Two-part question. Number one, how has the ASC evolved over the years, and what are some of the key initiatives during your tenure?
sure. So at the subcommittee, uh, we the subcommittee is one of the smallest federal government agencies you'll ever come across. When I first got there, I believe we had ten staff. And when you're working for an organization that's that small, as a lot of probably your listeners do, you're the chief cook and bottle washer. So even though I was the executive director, that didn't afford me a whole lot of niceties. I was, one of 10, 11, 12 staff working on a lot of different initiatives. And within 2 weeks of getting to the subcommittee, the hearing started on Capitol Hill in regard to the ongoing. This is about 2009, so the ongoing financial crisis, and those hearings eventually led to the Dodd-Frank Act, which created a number of changes for the appraisal subcommittee. And at the time, a colleague said, after the Dodd-Frank Act passed and all the changes to the subcommittee came down, and appraisal, other changes outside of the subcommittee, but a lot of the changes were focused on the ASC. And a colleague said, you may be working on implementing this for the rest of your career, and I literally was. So the Dodd-Frank Act was a huge directional event in my career at the ASC. It led to regulation of appraisal management companies by the states, the appraisal management company registry, the hotline, the requirement to have open meetings by the subcommittee, just a whole raft of changes that required a lot of coordination with our 7 board members. In fact, Dodd-Frank added 2 board members, the CFPB and FHFA were both added to the subcommittee as a result of Dodd-Frank. Um, so, we that was really from a macro standpoint, that really set the direction, for the next 15 plus years for me and for the subcommittee in terms of getting all of those things implemented.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where folks out here in the real world think, hey, we ought to get these things done really quickly. Things don't move very fast in that setting. It takes a long time to get things done.
It really does. And uh, 7 board members who are, for the most part, massive federal bureaucracies. They may be getting less massive, but for they're big bureaucracies that each have a certain way of doing things that just don't apply to a organization like the Appraisal Subcommittee. So yeah, it's a challenge working with that many board members who have lots of staff and lots of attorneys.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to guess lots of times differing goals and missions.
Yes,
And
yes,
trying,
and
try,
certainly different levels of commitment to the subcommittee and the appraisal profession itself. So yeah, it's a complicated mechanism.
it almost seems like you were hired to be chief cat herder.
Well, there was a lot of that. One of the things that I was hired to do is increase the profile of the subcommittee. When I first got to the subcommittee, um, very few appraisers understood, what the role of the subcommittee is and how we function relative to the appraisal foundation and the states. And um, there's still a lot of confusion out there. So I don't know how effective I've been over the years in explaining that and getting the word out. But the FFIEC, which the Federal Financial Institution Examination Council, which is our parent agency, um, a lot of the FFIEC members didn't even know that the appraisal subcommittee existed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after Dodd-Frank in particular, there was, the profile of the subcommittee, the authority, the revenue, all of those increased, which tended to make it increase the political nature of it as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's move on to the next topic. There's been a lot of discussion recently about modernization in the appraisal industry. What do you see as the biggest regulatory challenge ahead?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about this. There's a number of challenges, and I like to think of challenges as much as possible as opportunities, and I think we have a lot of opportunities out there. Um, so one of our challenges right now is as a profession is simply being relevant. And here's what I mean. Um, Somehow, it appears to me that at least in some parts of the profession, modernization has become kind of a 4-letter word, and and there are folks who want to keep maintain the status quo, and I think that that's not only just impossible, but it's a shame. So we need for the profession to come together somehow uh, and lead the modernization. And maybe it'll be more palatable if appraisers are leading the profession and not being led around by the nose. There's no one better suited to lead or be part of leading the effort to modernize or advance our own profession than appraisers. And those of you who have been around for a long time have heard for decades that the fragmentation of the business of the profession is detrimental. And I can tell you from a fair amount of experience working with folks on Capitol Hill and federal and state regulators that the fragmentation and not being able to speak with a unified voice like the mortgage bankers can, or the American Bar Association or the American Bankers Association, on top of being such a small profession, it's detrimental. So I hope the profession can find a way to coalesce around some leadership to propel it forward, in the upcoming decades. It's an important profession that absolutely can't go away.
The interesting thing is, in the world of real estate appraisal, there are two grand sections. There's the commercial and there's the residential. And then within those grand sections, you've got different organizations, different interest groups, different things. And it is frustrating to see so many different groups trying to make noise when if they would come together and present a cohesive message, I think they could have an impact on potential policy. And it is frustrating to see that. Here's the thing. And we focus primarily on the residential side of things here at Appraisal Buzz and Appraiser Learning, Valuation Expo, the big conference in Las Vegas. While there are commercial appraisers that come, the overwhelming majority of the folks that attend Val Expo are in and around the residential valuation space. With appraisal waivers coming down, alternative valuation products, all of these things that are under the guise of modernization, that some appraisers want to buck up against, to say, that's wrong, that's not going to work, that will never work. There is this balance between maintaining a professional demeanor in the profession and providing a really valuable service and embracing technology. They are not mutually exclusive.
No. In fact, I would argue that it's just the opposite, that the speed and level at which things like artificial intelligence are coming, and some of the things that I've seen recently, we either get on board with it towards the front of the train, hopefully in the locomotive, or we're going to be in the caboose or not on the train at all.
Yeah, you might be left at the station.
That would be a real shame, and I think he may have said it on this. He said it in a couple different interviews, but Dr. Mark Calabria used the quip that I've heard for years in DC as well, that if you're not at the table, you're more likely to be on the menu. And as appraisers, I mean, when you think about it, we're always on the menu. Somehow it would be nice to to change that dynamic and at least, maybe not be at the head of the table and hope for that, but at least be at the table. And sometimes appraisers are. I don't want to make it sound overly negative. Appraisers get, from what I've seen, get fair opportunities to, lobby Congress and so forth. It would just be a lot more effective if it was one voice.
I agree 100%. If that report of your father's you held up, I think could be Exhibit A, and that is the map page you showed me. I'm gonna guess that was one of those maps where you rub off the arrows onto the page.
I think it was even before that, to be honest.
So you're hand drawing arrows on the page.
Yeah, I mean, here's pictures.
Yeah,
if you remember
Polaroid pictures.
If you remember Polaroid and pasting pictures, the hand-drawn floor plan, yeah. So,
I mean, and there's one of the things I heard somebody say in a meeting a couple of years ago that stuck with me. There is no such thing as artisanal appraisal. there's, you can have artisanal carpentry where it's like a heritage breed of carpentry where somebody's doing timber framing and using really old tools. That doesn't exist in the appraisal space. I mean, when we embrace technology and become faster, we can in fact do more in a shorter time frame and probably earn more in the long run.
Well, isn't that the fundamental goal of industry and consumers? I mean, all concerned is to continue to advance our lives through, getting mortgage loans quicker if we can. Now, there's always the risk dynamic, and I don't want anybody to think I'm not thinking about that. I worked at Lehman Brothers. I saw risk manifest itself up close and personal. And if you don't manage it well, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And if these products that are being put out aren't managed and dare I say it, even regulated well, it'll come back to haunt us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, capitalism, it's the nature, and I don't think I'm saying anything negative here. It's the nature of the beast. We press it to the limit until it breaks.
Yeah.
And then we recalibrate.
And along those lines, just out of curiosity, what are some policy changes or initiatives you would like to see to improve this profession going forward?
Well, I've given a lot of thought, and something I'll probably give more thought to and maybe talk a little bit more publicly about in terms of staying in my lane. I think that there's a number of changes that can be made to the appraisal regulatory system that are desperately needed. And, the new administration may expose some of those. I have no idea what if any plans there are for the appraisal subcommittee, but this regulatory system, which anybody who's heard me talk very much, I almost always spend some time talking about how unique it is. And unique things have a lot of positive attributes, and this system has a lot of positive attributes, but it also has some weaknesses that there may be an opportunity to fix some of those weaknesses, but that remains to be seen. I would like all concerned, whether it's the Appraisal Institute, the Appraisal Foundation, the Appraisal Subcommittee. I just hope we can start focusing more and more on the future. I guess maybe because we just had the Super Bowl, but I think of it kind of either you can think of it as throwing a pass, or if you're shooting at a moving target, you lead, you get out in front of it. If you're going to make that pass, you don't throw it where the receiver was, you throw where the receiver's going to be. And that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. Let's do this. I'm going to take a real quick break, and we're going to hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
LIA Administrators and Insurance Services, serving valuation professionals since 1978. We provide E&O insurance with a commitment to superior customer service, outstanding liability education, and unmatched claim defense. Explore our exclusive appraiser liability education by Peter Christensen and cost-effective seminars designed to foster your growth. Our underwriters, with an average of 26 years of experience each, are dedicated to supporting appraisers. Visit liability.com to discover how LIA can safeguard your business.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host. I'm joined today by Jim Park, former director of the Appraisal Subcommittee. Jim, thank you again for taking the time to be here. It's always good to see your face, always good to spend time with you. Looking back on your career, what's something you're especially proud of?
Well, there's a number of things that I'm proud of. During my time at the subcommittee, and I've already touched on this, the subcommittee really evolved from, I'll call it a small backwater agency to a small agency that certainly had come out of the background into a much more visible um, light. And and there are being in more in the light comes with positive things and also some negative things to deal with. But overall, I'm proud of how such a small agency was able to work together cohesively to put all of these changes from Dodd-Frank into place. Um, we we recently engaged in a rulemaking that would increase the enforcement authority of the subcommittee. That was the final Dodd-Frank um, authority that was given to the subcommittee that we hadn't employed yet. But mostly, I think I'm proud of the relationship that the subcommittee has developed with the profession. I encouraged all of our staff members, who the program managers, deputy executive director, Denise Graves, when she was there, we wanted everybody to be part of the appraisal ecosystem, while remaining in our lane. But I thought it was really important that it was one of my goals from the beginning to increase the visibility of the subcommittee, and thereby get more input from the stakeholders as to what the subcommittee is doing good, what they're doing, what we're doing bad, and what they'd like to see differently. And I think that kind of transparency that the subcommittee has had over the last 15 or so years that's probably one of the most um, one of the things I'm most proud of.
I love it. That's a great answer. All right. I've had you on the line for quite some time. Let's end on what's one piece of advice you would give appraisers trying to get into this business today?
Well, I think my first piece of advice is to just acknowledge that it is a wonderful, important, fundamental profession that I don't think will ever be automated out of existence. Not in the foreseeable future, at least. When a part of what appraisers are doing is analyzing a human relationship when you're buying and selling homes, there's a lot more to it than dollars and cents. And I think it's going to be a long time before AI or any other automation can really tease that out. I think as automation increases, so is fraud and the potential for fraud. You're going to need people to look for that and to train these models on how to look at those kind of things. If I was getting into the business right now, thinking back to the analogy of throwing the pass, I'd be looking at what is the future of valuation going to be in this country. And I know it's hard to, or around the world, it's hard to say, but I would certainly focus on technology solutions, and I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on the learning how to do or spending a lot of time on traditional, quote unquote, traditional appraisal education and experience because it's likely antiquated.
Jim Park, Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. Again, it's always good to see your face, always good to spend a little bit of time with you. Now, I do want to run this up the flagpole because usually Jim Morrison comes at me with this anonymous appraiser question, and I didn't see anything in the show notes about it today. Jim Morrison, do we have an anonymous appraiser question or no?
No, we don't have one today. We're going to let Jim off the hook today, so let everybody breathe a sigh of relief. If anybody has any questions for our experts, reach out to us at comments@appraisalbuzz.com. We'd love to hear your questions.
Jim, thank you again. Jim Morrison, anything else we need to cover today?
No, thanks so much, Jim. We're excited to have a chance to talk with you again.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it and look forward to an exciting year.
Yes, indeed. And if we have nothing else for Jim Morrison and Jim Park, I'm Hal Humphreys, and that is your Appraisal Buzz for this week.